through the first 10 verses, I guess, pretty much. So we're going to continue that tonight. And I'm going to start reading with verse 11. We'll read the rest of the chapter and we'll see how far we get tonight, because I want us to discuss. I mean, if you got a question, let's share it and let's learn the word together. It says, "But I certify you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached of me is not after man. For I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. For you have heard of my conversation in times past in the Jews' religion, how that beyond measure I persecuted the church of God and wasted it, and profited in the Jews' religion above many my equals in my own nation, being more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my father. But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by His grace, to reveal His Son in me, that I might preach Him among the heathen, immediately I conferred not with flesh and blood, neither when I went up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me. But I went into Arabia, and returned again unto Damascus. Then after 3 years I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter, and abode with him 15 days. But other of the apostles saw I none, save James, the Lord's brother. Now the things which I write unto you, behold, before God I lie not. Afterwards I came into the region of Syria and Sicily, and was unknown by face unto the churches of Judea, which were in Christ. But they had heard only that he which persecuteth us in times past now preacheth the faith which once he destroyed, and they glorified God in me." Amen. Who wants to take off first? I got you. I'm coming. This is really Paul's introduction, pretty much, to the the Galatians. So this section we read, this passage, if you will, what are the main thoughts that you feel like Paul is conveying? You know, what are we learning from what Paul is saying here? Paul's building a platform, I guess, if you will. That's right. Someone else. The main thought that Paul's portraying. I like the description David used, flat-footed. I mean, Paul was like, to the point. The truth. And these questions, there's a little guide I'm going by, so that's why I print out these questions and lessons, but I don't want us to just limit ourselves to them, trying to answer them. I want us to move where if there's something that sticks out with us, and we will in the next few chapters definitely talk about some things when we get into the fruit of the Spirit and other things, but I think he's laying a groundwork here, you know, writing to this church, and I think the way he talks about it's powerful that he's already defending Christ before he ever really gets started. You know, he's like saying, this isn't learned behavior. You know, I didn't run straight to the apostles and kind of pattern myself after them. You know, I went to Arabia. I went to the desert. I went away from the action, if you will, because I've had an encounter with Jesus Christ, and this revelation that he's had is burning inside of him, and he wants to share it with the people. So he's beginning to share it with the Galatians. Uh, yeah. The second question asked, who was the Apostle Paul trying to please? I mean, it's very obvious. You know, I'm here because of Jesus Christ. You know, and I think he does a great job of explaining it on over in the latter part that we read, or well, kind of in the middle. You know, he's saying, I know what I'm talking about because I have studied the traditions. This religion that is being taught. He said, I know it. I was far above some of my equals. You know, it was kind of on that line like I was smarter than some of the teachers. You know, I know what I'm talking about. I know what you're talking about. I know both sides of this, and I know that Jesus Christ, the revelation, the gospel. First few verses we talked about the gospel, you know, the true gospel, the only one gospel. And here Paul is saying, there's only one gospel. Hey, Church of Galatia, listen, it's Jesus. He is the one. You know, I'm not trying to please you. I'm not trying to please the religious crowd. I'm trying to please God. No, I am. I'm going to please God, is what he's saying. You know, this is the way that it's going to be. So he begins to set the groundwork, I believe, of his ministry in that region. Well, in every region, because he stood on that same platform through everywhere he went. But he had this dogmatic, maybe. It's what they label it, you know, and we get called holy rollers or dogmatic or fanatic or hardliners, radical, you know. My mom and daddy was hardliners. I mean, we had certain things that, you know, it wasn't debatable. They'd help you find your own way, but your own way better be the right way. Or they would help you find the right way because they knew it was best for you. And Paul's like, look, if you're doing this, you're wrong. This is it. This is the gospel. It's not, you know, there's no other way. This is the way, you know. So what questions is he asking? What questions is he answering? What is Paul saying? Anybody else? Who was he trying to please? Oh. And then I think as we study this, you know, we have to ask the question, okay, I'm learning, I see what Paul's saying, but what do we say? Who are we trying to please? I mean, if I read the book of Galatians, I need to learn more than just what Paul offered the Galatian church. What can I learn from this? Am I fully persuaded? Am I all about pleasing God? What am I doing to please God? What am I seeking? Who am I seeking? We're oftentimes asked a lot of times, not just in church, but what are your goals in life? You know, we're asked all through school. What are your plans after school? Going to college. What are you going to major in? What are you going to minor? What do you want, a little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Every little boy wants to be an astronaut or a cowboy or rodeo something or something, you know. And then as we get older, we kind of lose that and we start focusing on, hey, what I want to be. Obviously, Andy wanted to be an electrician or he wouldn't have went through all the classes to learn how to be an electrician. So on the spiritual side of that, who are we trying to please? What are we putting our effort into? Paul's teaching us that he's seeking God. But when it pleased God, I want to please God. We've kind of already covered this, verse 11 and 12. It says, where did Paul get his message? Straight from Jesus. I mean, where do we get our message? Where do we get our message? I mean, do we spend? I mean, obviously, Saul didn't spend a lot of time with Jesus. He spent a lot of time with the law. But after that miraculous conversion, I mean, in prison, he's writing epistles. I mean, he's praying. He's in an inner prison with Silas, and they're praying. I mean, obviously the man was serious about seeking God. Serious about seeking God. And because he was serious about seeking God, I believe that's why his message was so powerful. Because that's where his message came from. Revelation. What else? Question, interjection?
I'm gonna fly on the wall. You know, where you can see the transformation take place. I think that would be cool. Nobody thinks that's cool.
Incredibly cool. Then the next verse, you kind of touched on it there, it talks about what kind of life was Paul living before he became a Christian. No, that's what we're supposed to do. But, you know, it wouldn't, I mean, in theory, we say, because, you know, when I think of Saul before his conversion, the thing that sticks out to me most is the fact that he was standing there holding Stephen's coat when he was stoned. That's one of the things that really highlight that life, his previous life, to me. You know, obviously, but I mean, he was a man of high intelligence, and probably a man well respected to have the knowledge that he had among the religious crowd. I mean, really a leader. I mean, so it wasn't like he was, you know, we tell the testimony so many times of a person that's been strung out on drugs or that's been an alcoholic all their life, and God saved them, and just the total change. Or they're just like the meanest man in town or the grippiest woman in town gets saved, and now she's got a heart full of love, and she just, but Paul was like, he was a very prominent man in society. I mean, he wasn't a loser. God to just change his life. I guess I don't know the answer to that, but obviously he's probably working for that. To move up the ladder or whatever. And now it's suddenly changed. He's got this revelation of who Jesus is. And we'll study later on where he's saying things like, I'm the chiefest sinner. I'm the lowliest sinner ever. But God loved me so much. But you said in your description, you were talking about how exciting it'd be. And then you said that all of us, is our transformation any different than that? From Saul to Paul? Or do we think it less? I mean, I didn't get knocked off the horse. I don't know if you did. But it was a pretty earth-shaking moment in my life. A great transformation. That language changed, habits changed, attitude changed, a lot of things changed. True. Had the law to back him up. The scrolls. Question in verse 15 and 16 where he talks about that it pleased God who separated me from my mother's womb to reveal his Son in me that I might preach him among the heathen. It said, describe God's purpose for the Apostle Paul. And we do, and we've talked about this for a couple of weeks now, and I'm like, Andy, I feel like Paul was the last apostle. That apostleship, as we know it and see it. But he's saying that there was a purpose. Go ahead. That's right. Ultimate purpose. Mm-hmm. Purpose. Discussion question, it's not on here. But does each and every one have a purpose? A God-called purpose? How do we identify that with the matter of fact personality like Paul did? He said, I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know this is what God has called me to do, and I'm going to do it. And like I said before, you see it all throughout Romans, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, all the way through. Even just amazing, some of the writings and some of the words that he wrote, that when you really study where he was at, what he was facing, and his purpose was always first. It was foremost. I'm going to do what God has called me to do. If I end up in prison, if I end up making tents, if I end up in this country, if I end up shipwrecked, it's still all about the purpose. Very powerful thought when you start thinking about Paul's purpose, but then start thinking about our purpose. Why do you think Paul made such a point in verse 17 to say, first thing after this happened, I didn't go straight into Jerusalem to where the disciples were. I didn't go to Peter and James and John, and I didn't go to the 12. Why do you think Paul made note of that? Again, I'm not asking you a question and then I'm going to give you the answer, because I don't know that I know the answer. Just curiosity. As I was studying Galatians, I'm like, why did Paul make a point to say that I went out to Arabia, I went to Damascus? Because he ends up going and talking to Peter and staying with him a couple of weeks. Can you imagine that conversation? But he makes it a point to say, this is the route I went. Would have probably what?